My career felt as if it was over in a snap. I had the world's greatest job at the time. I was director of marketing for Parker Brothers Toys and Games. I went into work one day. The receptionist said, Doug, Larry would like to see you up in his office. And I went up there and he said, Doug, your job's been eliminated. You need to be out of here by noon. I packed up my stuff and went home to my wife, our two small children, and our very large mortgage, feeling every bit the victim.
The road to leadership is never a straight line. On this podcast, I'm interviewing the world's most interesting leaders about their mountaintop moments, their stumbling blocks, and everything in between. This is Stumbling Blocks, how great leaders are made. Hey there, it's Jonathan Block, and I am going to be joined in just a few moments by Doug Conant, who, as you just heard, lost his job at age 32 and then went on to become CEO of Campbell Soup. And turned the company around from a financial perspective and also from a culture perspective. Take a listen. Well, Doug, I just feel incredibly grateful and lucky to have you on the podcast today. A number of years ago, I was working with a Fortune 50 company who was trying to do a culture turnaround, similar to the one that you led at Campbell's. And in my research on successful turnarounds, I learned about you and have been following you ever since. So Doug, you are not only a Fortune 500 CEO, but also a New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestselling author. Your latest book is The Blueprint, 6 Practical Steps to Lift Your Leadership to New Heights. You're the former president and CEO of Campbell Soup, former president of Nabisco Foods, former chairman of Avon Products, and you've been on many, many boards, including some of the bigger companies in the world. So I want to jump right in.
Let's go.
All right. I figured you'd be a little bit impatient. I want to jump right into your story. At age 32, you had just lost your job. You talked a bit about how that experience shaped you, but I wonder if you can just tell a bit more about how that shaped you.
I had the world's greatest job at the time. I was director of marketing for Parker Brothers Toys and Games. I lived in Old Town Marblehead outside of Boston. My family had been the founding family of Salem, Massachusetts, which was right next door. My family had founded a church that we ended up joining in Marblehead. We were a toy and game company innovating all the time, and I'd just bring things home and the kids would be sitting on the stoop at our house built in 1745 and they'd want to see what I brought home that day. I was the most popular dad on the block.
I'm sure you were. That's amazing.
It was great. And we ended up getting spun off from the parent company and downsized, just like you're going through. And I went into work one day, totally oblivious to all that. The receptionist said, Doug, Larry would like to see you up in his office. He was the acting senior vice president of marketing. And I went up there and he couldn't look at me. And I thought, well, that's weird. But he said, Doug, your job's been eliminated. You need to be out of here by noon. And I had just moved to Boston for this job. I had moved from the Midwest. And, it was a big deal. And we had just had our second son, and I was just shocked. My career felt as if it was over in a snap. And then I packed up my stuff and went home to my wife, our two small children, and our very large mortgage, feeling every bit the victim. Then I got a call from the company that afternoon saying, basically, we were so anxious to get you out of the building, we forgot to tell you your benefits. And you have an outplacement counselor and you got all these benefits. And I basically hung up on them the first time. And then after I was home for a few more hours, I realized, God, I got to get a job. I can't be in this house all day with our little kids and the dog and the 2 cats. And so I called them back and was introduced to Neil McKenna. And went and met with him that night, and he had a profound influence on me. And it was all about influence with honor. And so that was my story, except that was a horrible interview. I was introverted. At the time, you couldn't talk about losing your job because it had a taint to it, like you must have been a performance issue. So I just didn't handle it very well. And it took with the help from Neil over the course of a better part of a year, I got my feet on the ground, my bearings, and I ended up securing another job, but it took a year of work to do it.
So you are laid off. You re-enter the workforce a year later, as you said, and eventually you work your way out to Nabisco, a leadership role at Nabisco Biscuit Company. When you enter, you talked a bit about how an engagement survey you commissioned at the start of your tenure there produced the worst results that the company conducting the survey had ever seen. They called your culture, and I'm quoting now, swamp water. And they told you your employees had the lowest levels of trust they had ever measured. In year 2, they measured again at your request, and they were shocked to find out that the swamp water had turned to Perrier. And then in year 3, they came back and measured again, and they said the swamp water has turned to Perrier, has turned to champagne in terms of employee engagement. How did you do it?
Well, first of all, I believe you can't manage things like this unless you measure them somehow. And it's not a perfect science measuring employee engagement, but you get the idea whether things are working or they're not. And just at Nabisco, they were coming out of barbarians at the gate. It was a highly toxic culture. KKR was the owner, and KKR was actually private equity, was a good owner, but all the people leading Nabisco were playing a short-term game, and I don't play a short-term game. I play a long-term game, and so I wanted to create a culture that was distinctive and would stand the test of time. And so we found, look, to create a high engagement culture, I'm going to really simplify this. You got to do 4 things. Stephen Covey took Maslow's hierarchy of needs and boiled it down to 4 things, which I can remember because they all start with L. It's living, loving, learning, leaving a legacy. At the base of the pyramid, you got to have good working environment. I mean, the things have to work. The next level up is loving. People have to feel appreciated and valued. The next level up is they also have to have opportunities to learn and grow. And at the peak of the pyramid, they have to experience some kind of self-actualization where they feel like they're working on something special. And so my whole career has been focusing on creating high engagement cultures where people were getting the tools they needed to do the job, where we were celebrating contributions of significance, where they had opportunities to learn and grow, and where they were very mission driven. My thank you notes that you alluded to earlier were me celebrating contributions of significance to our employees every day. And I did 10 to 20 notes every day, 6 days a week for a decade. When I retired, Forbes was doing an interview and they said, well, how many notes did you send out? You send out a lot of notes, right? I said, I do 10 to 20 a day, 6 days a week. And it turned out to be 30,000 notes. And we only had
A lot of notes.
4,000 employees. So wherever you were in the world, we were in 38 countries. Wherever you were in the world, there was one of my notes tacked up in the cubicle. And it wasn't just saying happy birthday. It was thank you for helping us achieve this milestone or improving our safety record or delivering this project on time under budget. It was celebrating contributions of significance to the enterprise and associating those contributions with the people that delivered them. And my gosh, I would write those notes on the way into work every day. I had a 2.5-hour commute, so I had time to write. And by the time I got in, I had just celebrated 10 to 20 amazing contributions. And I had a spring in my step when I got in the office. It's like,
I
God,
bet you did.
this is an amazing place. And, it's sort of like, I don't know if you were ever a runner or anything like that,
Yeah.
but you get this runner's high,
I'm a Spartan racer.
and you can't, if you don't run, you miss it.
Yeah.
And that's the way I felt about those notes. And there was so much good stuff going on. So, but celebrating contributions of significance is a big deal if you're trying to build a high engagement culture.
So I mean, Doug, it's incredible. 30,000 notes is no small thing from one person. And I wonder, you talked about making time for it on the train ride. What did you give up to make the time for those notes?
Well, it was on a car. I had a driver. I was living 2.5 hours from the office.
Yeah.
And my daughter, when I took the job, was just going into high school. And we lived like a mile from my mother-in-law and 3 miles from my sister-in-law. We were not going to relocate at that time.
Yeah.
So I had a car. And look, I'm old school. All these notes were handwritten. They were not typed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, but my assistant would pull off everything on our portal about any performance for the day. And she would give me a pile of stuff about this big that I'd take in the car on the way home. I'd read through it all and I knew what was going on with the company. And I'd pick 10 to 20 things I wanted to celebrate. And I'd think about it overnight. And then I'd have those 10 to 20 things that I would work on in the car. So I really wasn't giving up anything of a personal nature. I was making it part of my work life.
You're making an
Uh,
investment. Yeah.
and I couldn't think of something more important to do.
Mm.
You know, what was interesting was the people that I worked with said, "Do you expect us to be writing thank you notes to everybody?" And I said, "No, but I do expect you to celebrate contributions of significance any way you want. If you
Yeah.
want to manage by wandering around and just talk to people, great. You could do it any way you want, but I do believe you need to celebrate what's working because Lord knows most companies are good at finding what's not working and drilling in on it and trying to fix it. So
Absolutely.
if you're going to be a culture champion, you've got to bring a more balanced perspective so that you're going to deal with what's not working, but you also are clear eyed that even in the most broken companies I found, 8 out of 10 things are being done right.
Yeah.
And celebrating some of those is a good thing.
So, Doug, a second ago, you mentioned that Campbell's is in, I think you said 38 countries, and that no matter where you went in those countries, because there were 24,000 employees, and by the end of your tenure, you'd written 30,000 notes. There was more than one note per employee in every cube, roughly speaking. You and I were exchanging comments on LinkedIn. Your former employees, all of whom had moved on to different companies, or most of whom had, commented and said, "I still have my note from you, Doug. Thank you so much for the way you inspired me." And you left that role nearly 15 years ago. And I can't tell you what that did to me as a leader to realize how much you changed the lives of the people that you led. And 15 years later, they still have the notes you wrote.
Well, it wasn't the only thing I did, but we made work personal. We celebrated their individuality and their personal contributions to the work. And they found that so meaningful and so fulfilling.
You say um, in your book, The Blueprint, 6 Practical Steps to Lift Your Leadership, you say the only way out is by going in. And you say that's something that you learned right after you were let go at the age of 32. What is that? What does
Uh,
that mean?
yeah, I did lose my job at the age of 32. And that's where I had that phenomenal outplacement counselor who helped me reshape my life. But the first thing the outplacement counselor did was he had me handwrite my life story. I said, I don't have time to handwrite my life story. I got to get a job. And he said, this is the perfect time to handwrite your life story. You don't have a job and you have time to write it. So write it. And I want it handwritten and I want it in 2 weeks and put everything in there that you know about your family, everything. And I did. And I discovered that I had a pretty amazing family. And somehow, through my acculturation into the world of work, I'd lost track of that. You know, when we're being raised, we're trying to make our parents happy, our coaches happy, our teachers happy, our professors happy, our bosses happy. And somewhere along the line, making ourselves happy gets put in the parking lot. And we lose touch with who we are and how we want to show up. And the whole purpose of the Blueprint book was to help people get in touch with who they really are. And what we found was all the answers to your issues start with your life story, the good, the bad, and the ugly of it. Friend Brene Brown has a great quote. I'm going to screw it up, but the quote is basically, look, you can either stand inside of your story and own it, or you can stand outside of your story and hustle for your worthiness every day. I was standing outside of my story at work trying to make everybody else happy, and I was hustling for my worthiness every day. I wasn't in my story. And I learned that when I had to write my life story. And Neil McKenna, my outplacement counselor, said, Doug, this makes no sense to me. I said, what do you mean? He said, I read your life story and I'm helping you prepare to go interview. And you're a person of amazing substance. but you're an introvert who's going on a job hunt and you're just trying to make people happy, whatever they want. That's not you. What do you stand for? What do you stand for? In today's language, he would say, "What's your brand? What do you stand for?" And boy, that was a powerful lesson. I'm starting to actually be able to talk about it with great conviction now. And it all starts with your life story. And segue, but I'm doing a lot of commentary on AI these days and AI and leadership. Well, AI can't tell you your life story. It can't intuit it. It can't help you get to the essence of who you really want to be. You have to live it and roll around in it and create it. And AI can maybe facilitate some processing, but it's something only you can do. And what I love is when we help people sort of get anchored in who they want to be and how they want to show up, how free they feel. It's like, you know, basically, most of these leaders are leading by the seat of their pants. They're just reacting to whatever's coming their way, and they have good intentions, but they haven't really examined their how they want to show up, and it's not very fulfilling. Well, to make it fulfilling, you got to go inside and figure it out, and then you can take it outside, and you can start to impact the world around you.
You said that your leadership purpose is to help build high trust, high performance teams that honor people, defy the critics, and thrive in the face of adversity. And I wonder if you can just unpack that a little bit.
Oh gosh, every word in that purpose statement has some meaning to me. That's because I've mulled it over for 20 years, but I'll just unpack a few elements of it. First of all, when I lost my job, the outplacement counselor I was associated with, every time he answered the phone, he said, "How can I help?" And I was so vulnerable at the time, I didn't realize how much I needed that, someone who's just there for me. And when he passed away, I decided I was just going to focus on helping explicitly uh, on the day of his passing. And then I thought, that's ridiculous. Why, if it's good on the day of his passing, am I not doing it every other day? And that's when I engineered the notion of helping into everything I've done overtly. The other piece of this is leadership is a team sport, and it's about building a team of people who can do things that individuals cannot do. And so I believe that you have to help leaders build high performance teams. And I also believe that trust is at the center of it. Stephen M. R. Covey is one of my best friends, and he's the king of trust. And that's how I got to the language of help build high trust, high performance teams. And the single biggest thing for me with everyone I encounter in life is that my challenge is to honor them. And when I focus on honoring people, it's amazing how my life gets lifted. And when I honor people, they sort of by nature will honor my agenda, and it just makes the whole thing work. So honor is at the heart of my leadership model, high trust, high performance teams. And when I was starting out, it was in the dark ages of leadership in the 70s and 80s. And this thing about honoring people was not a big topic at the time. This is, what do you want to, this is business, not people, it's business. And I never bought that. And I found that as I went through life, the more I focused on people, the better we did. But that was defying the critics. So there's a part of that's very important to me, that you got to stand on your own 2 feet and you've got to stand up for the things you believe in, because it's not the critic who counts. The man who pointed out how the poor man stumbles, or whether the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the person who is actually in the arena. And so in that world, I channel my Teddy Roosevelt language. So all of that found its way into that personal mission statement. And I got to say, it's just, on one hand, it's a collection of words, but it's so much more than that. It defines how I show up. And when I share it with people, I'm then really accountable. I got to show up that way because I told them that's what I'm going to do. And wow, they'd say, "Oh, okay, we'll see. We'll see if you show up this way." And I do. And we build trust because I'm doing what I said I'd do. And it all worked. So that's the power of purpose.
Doug, I think it's so interesting. In your purpose statement and at the heart of your leadership flywheel is the phrase honor people. And you just spoke to that a little bit. But it is not something that you see at the center of every CEO's dashboard. And I wonder if you can go a little bit deeper. Why is it there?
When I became a CEO, I thought, well, I've made it. Okay, I'm going to be in the corner office. I was 49 years old, CEO of a Fortune 500 company. And okay, I've made it. So I sit in my office and I didn't make any decisions. There were 1,000 decisions made every hour. And nobody came to check with me. The people were just making the decisions. And if it was a good decision, they made sure I knew about it. If it was a bad decision, they'd repackage it and make sure I knew about it and that it was a good decision. So I realized I was totally dependent on other people, totally. And it's like, well, if I'm that dependent on all these people, I really need to lean into building the relationship with these people that can stand the test of the stress of everyday business. And I've got to build a high trust culture where they trust me and I trust them. Otherwise, this is going to be a slippery slope to a disaster. So that's when I really leaned into the notion of honoring people. I also had a friend who was Stephen Covey's partner, Lane Lee. He wrote a book, one of the most powerful books I ever read because I read it at just the right time for me. And it was about principle-centered leadership. And the subtitle is Influence with Honor. And basically said, look, there are three ways. There's three ways you can influence people. One is through fear and intimidation. And if you don't do this, you lose your job. And they will do it. But you're building a reservoir of ill will that will not serve you well over time. Then the other path is transactional power, which is if you do this, I'll do that. I'll pay for performance. You help me, I'll help you. One hand washes the other. And that's basically how business works, transactional power. And then he said, think about the people who had the most profound influence on you. A grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, a coach. Very rarely is it a boss, interestingly. And he said, well, how often did they influence you with fear and intimidation? And you'd say, no, that wasn't it. Well, how often did they say, if you do this, I'll give you a quarter? Was it transactional? No, it's not that. And then he'd say, well, what was it? And he would tell you, they honored you. That had the most profound influence on you in your life. So what if you were a little more like them with the people with whom you live and work? You can do that. You know what this looks like. You've experienced it. You've had profound influence. You know how they did it. And you know yourself. So he would lead you to this place of honor. And it stuck with me. And it was one of the most important lessons I learned when I was working with the Covey Leadership Center years ago.
Yeah. So you turned around the culture at Campbell's, but you also turned around its financial performance. Just speak to that a little bit, the ties between financial performance and culture.
Well, if you do any research on employee engagement, you find that high engagement cultures are 23% more profitable than low engagement cultures. And it shows up in every line of the balance sheet and the P&L because people are being a little more diligent and a little more careful and a little more responsible with the disposition of their duties. And so it's a no-brainer. You create a place where people feel valued and where you celebrate their contributions. And guess what? Then their contributions go up and you do even better. The last 7 years I was there, after the first 3 when we had to turn it around, we outperformed the S&P food group and the overall market by a factor of, I don't know, 6 or 7. It was because of the employee engagement. So, And you have to do both. This is the thing that some people miss. You've got to be tough-minded on standards of performance and tender-hearted with people. If you just all hold hands and sing Kumbaya, that's not good enough. You actually have to do the work, and you got to deal with the tough issues, and you got to address the challenges of the day. And we did that too. So you got to be both tough-minded on standards and tender-hearted with people. When I started in the world of work, it was sort of a Jack Welch kind of thing. You got to be tough-minded, tough, tough, tough. And I thought you got to be more human than that. And you had to defy the critics. And you need to be tough-minded on standards because you got to perform. But you can also be caring with people too. It's not one or the other. I mean, I think of all the parents that I know. You ask them, do you have high standards for your kids? Yes. Do you have their back? Yes. Do they know you love them? Yes. Do they know you have high expectations of them? Yes. I don't want to equate leading people to parenting.
Yeah.
But there is a parallel there where you can have high standards and you can also love them to death too.
In the blueprint, and you just said it yourself, in the blueprint book, you say your life story is your leadership story. And you've talked a bit about how for you that was pivotal. And I wonder if you can talk about how you've seen it work for other executives when they embrace their life story, how that impacts their leadership.
All the entrepreneurs I know, Phil Knight, Richard Branson, Gary V on social media, they are in touch with who they are. They're showing up with great authenticity. And and people can smell it, they can feel it, they will respond to it. And they are showing up in a way that is highly authentic and highly motivating to people. And I don't know of an exceptional leader in the corporate world that isn't showing up with a high degree of authenticity. I worked on the board of, it was called AmerisourceBergen. Now it's Cencora. It's a $300 billion company now.
Yeah.
And Steve Collis, the CEO, is just retiring. What you saw was what you got. He was the most authentic, well-intentioned leader you could think of. And it enabled him to create this fantastic organization of people who were highly engaged in their work for all the right reasons and creating great value for society and for their employees and their shareholders. And you know it when you see it.
Yeah.
You know it when you see it. And I don't know anybody who's great at creating value in an enduring way that will stand the test of time that's not that way, that's inauthentic. Look, you can be successful. You can have a one-hit wonder. Or you can start out with a lot of money and make more. I mean, there are all kinds of ways to do it.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to create an enduring legacy of contribution, in my opinion, it should be growing out of your life story.
You know, it's interesting on social media. I at times post self-promotional posts, right? I'm doing X, Y, I think, and giving such and such a speech, and no one really cares. Maybe my mom does. But then the most popular post I think I've ever posted was a post that was titled 5 Mistakes I've Made. And I was real and vulnerable and talked about mistakes I've made along the way. And to your point, people can sniff that out and are hungry for something.
Yeah, they want, and especially in a world that's so anxious and chaotic right now, they want to feel like they can touch you, and they want to have a sense of your humanity.
Yeah.
Because we have a culture right now that's, what do they call it, a Bonnie culture now. It's that it used to be a VUCA culture: volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. That was a VUCA culture. Now there's a new term, and it's called a Bonnie culture. You can Google it; it's there. It's brittle, anxious, nonlinear, incomprehensible. That's how you define the world we're living in, and it's led to record high levels of anxiety in the workforce, and they hunger to be connected to people who are real. I mean, I am. So I think you can't go wrong. And not only that, but everyone we work with, when they're real, they do better. I mean, they are who they are. They're doing things that they're motivated to do, and they derive joy from the work, and they share that joy with others. It's the only way to go.
Not long ago, I attended a summit hosted by a private equity investor named Brent Bayshore. And Brent got up at the start of this summit. And as a PE guy, you sort of expected to talk dollars and cents. And he stands up at the start of the summit and says, there are a couple of basic human needs I want to talk about. The need to feel like you belong, and the need to feel like you're important and you matter. And you do. You belong here and you're important and you matter. And we'll all be inclined as we go through this conference to say things like, how are you? I'm fine. How are you? Where are you from? I'm from such and such. Where are you from? And that won't really lead to actually any meaningful conversation. And so I encourage you to instead start by saying, my name's Jonathan, and here's what I'm working on, and here's where I need your help. And then that gives the other person a place to enter the conversation. And what I was shocked by, Doug, is that people, when they left that 2-day private equity conference, they said it was life-changing. And you don't often hear that about a private equity conference, but it was because of the vulnerability and authenticity that Brent modeled. And then the conversations that we had were much richer for it.
Point well made. Point well made.
So I want to go, you've written a book called TouchPoints about how to do these moments in time that matter to people. And especially in an all virtual world or a hybrid world, which is where most executives operate now. Most of the people listening to this will have teams who are either dispersed nationally or globally. I wonder if you can walk us through what a meaningful touch point looks like.
Well, if I had to pick one key, it's leading by listening. It's really being dialed into the people you work with, where they're coming from. So you tend to ask, what's the issue? How can I help? That I stole from Neil McKenna. And what's the next step? And it's not trying to solve the issue. It's just trying to help whoever's you're working with move it forward. I used to try and solve everybody's problems for them, and that I wasn't good at it. But I could help them move it along. And if you manage it well, it's a 2-minute process and it's memorable. I used it at Campbell. I would get my 10,000 steps in every day, and I would walk the floor wherever I was at the time, and I would connect with employees. And in those 2 minutes, I'd say, what's the issue? How can I help? And they knew I was paying attention.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science, but a lot of executives look at that as a waste of time. To me, it's the most precious time, because you're making a human connection with the people doing the work, and they know you're paying attention and you care, and the next time you see them, how did it go? And it just makes the whole work environment so much richer.
Yeah. I asked recently on a webcast that I hosted, I asked the folks who attended just to type in one time in their life when a leader profoundly earned their trust. And the kinds of examples that came through are exactly what you're speaking to. People wrote, a leader had a conversation with me and then remembered the conversation the next time we met. Or a leader stood up for me when someone was bullying me. Or a leader had my back when I had an idea that didn't work out. These very simple moments, but hard to do if you're focused on yourself as a leader.
Yeah, it's all about the people you work with and the people you're traveling with on the journey.
And then for leaders who are listening, who might feel overwhelmed at the prospect of writing 30,000 thank you notes, what is one thing, one step they can take starting tomorrow to achieve leadership that works?
Well, I think the first step, and you're doing it, I think it's to get more in touch with your life story, and then to find a place in your life story that really worked for you, and then find a way to bring that forward to dealing with other people. If your grandfather had a way of engaging with you that was memorable, maybe that's a way you could engage with others. Okay.
Yeah.
And you'd be channeling your grandfather with others. It should grow out of your life story for sure. And all the stuff we talk about, your life story is your leadership story. That's all fine and good, but ultimately it's about your behavior, and you got to show up for people. And so a big step in the blueprint process is identifying specific practices to bring that your leadership model to life so people know the leader you're trying to be, not so they can intuit it somehow, because they're not paying that much attention. You got to show up. They had to get that thank you note from me. If I was just throwing gratuitous thank yous around, wouldn't have mattered, I think.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Doug. I know I have learned so much from you over the years, and today included. Your leadership and the way that you are people first and seek to honor people, everyone. It means the world to me to spend some time with you, and I know it will to our listeners as well. Thanks so much.
Well, I wish you all the luck. Best of luck going forward.
I'm in awe of the way that Doug took losing his job in his early 30s with 2 young kids at home, and took the opportunity to go in, to learn his own story, and then to become a better leader and eventually earn his way up to becoming a CEO who turned companies around. I hope that you will join me for the next Selling Blocks, which is going to be with another CEO, this time with the CEO of one of America's largest airlines, who had a heart transplant while he was in office as CEO, and turn the company's results around at the same time. I can't wait to share the story, and I hope you'll join me.